FPL Game Week 1 is finally here, and it's time to reveal my final team selection. I have made a lot of changes, but I feel like this team is pretty much locked in, and I can't wait to show you it. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like, aiming for 300 on this video, and of course, if you're not already, make sure you do smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. And enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, I think one of the biggest mistakes FPL managers are making coming into this deadline is they're not giving enough thought about when they want to activate their wildcard. This season is completely different to all of them with the FPL rule changes. And I do think an early wildcard is more imperative than ever to consider for your strategy. And with me, I am looking at a wildcard in Game Week 4. And I want to just go through the reasons being why, because I think it's really important for you to understand whether you want to do the same thing, because it will change the way your Game Week 1 team looks. So first and foremost, if you go for an early wildcard, it means that you can target those great fixtures early doors like Spurs, Arsenal and Newcastle. I'm putting the fixtures up here for you to take a look at those particular fixtures. Now, the reason why it's important to understand whether you want a wildcard in Game Week 4 or not is because if you're looking more longer term, Spurs after Game Week 2, some would argue, the fixtures get a little bit more ropey. Arsenal in particular, Game Week 4 and 5 is terrible, and Newcastle's fixtures also turn after Game Week 3. So I'm seeing a lot of managers out there actually completely avoiding Arsenal. Some are avoiding Spurs, and some even don't want to touch Newcastle outside of Alexander Isak. I think the big problem with that is that these first three fixtures are so damn good. Arsenal at home against Wolves. I even think away against Villa is not out of the realms of possibility of keeping a clean sheet with Villa's pre-season form. And Game Week 3 against a new manager's Brighton, that could also be a comfortable win for Arsenal. So that is why in Game Week 4, I'm planning to wildcard, because it means that I can target those teams that have unbelievable fixtures. I just think it's wrong to go without them. Now, number 2 here, we can swing against Mo Salah in the short term. A lot of people are talking about building teams without Mo Salah, and I think that's a great strategy. But would I want to do no Mo Salah for 6, 7, 8 game weeks? Probably not. And that is why I think for the first 3 game weeks, it's actually a really good strategy to go for a Diogo Jota or Luis Diaz, knowing that in Game Week 4, the plan's to wildcard, and if Mo Salah hits the ground running and he is just incredible, we can go to him easy, and you're only really minimising the damage in those opening 3 game weeks. I don't like no Mo Salah for 6, 7, 8 game weeks. Number 3, wildcard in early doors means that you're planning the return of Phil Foden and Kevin De Bruyne as a potential Haaland alternative. Unfortunately right now, especially with the Oscar Bob news, we don't really have any alternatives to Erling Haaland in this Man City team. And I think with Ipswich at home in Game Week 2, a lot of managers are thinking, I kind of by default need to have Haaland in my team because Liverpool actually possess some alternatives to Mo Salah, like Jota and Luis Diaz. So wildcard in a Game Week 4 means you can almost flip the team on its head. Go for the Haaland draft in the opening 3, target those fixtures. And then in Game Week 4, if Salah looks absolutely essential, flip it on its head, knowing that Phil Foden is back in, and you could almost do Haaland down to Foden and update Jota to Mo Salah, for example. Number 4 here gives us time to assess teams and assets. While I'd prefer 6, 7, 8 game weeks worth of information, I think we could come to some conclusions early doors on Chelsea, Man United, Brighton and Liverpool in particular, whose fixtures turn quite good from Game Week 4 onwards. So at Brighton, if Minter, if João Pedro look fantastic, I don't really want Brighton for those opening 3 where the fixtures are very mixed. But Game Week 4 onwards, I really do like them. So it gives me an understanding of which player exactly I want to bring into my teams. Also in Game Week, as I mentioned, I can be aggressive in those opening 3 game weeks, which I think is really, really important. Sometimes you need to be aggressive. You can be template, but in a game right now where there's so many different price points, I think the team isn't template for a reason. There are many different routes that you can go for. And I want to go for the aggressive one in the opening game weeks to really capitalize on those points available. The big thing here, number 6, is that if you do get lucky and you've been aggressive in the opening 3 game weeks, and let's say Diogo Jota emerges as the best Liverpool asset, Spurs look incredible under Ange, you might actually have to wildcard in Game Week 4. You could be in a position right now where you've been aggressive in the opening 3 game weeks, you get to Game Week 4 and you look at your team and think, I actually only need to make 1 or 2 transfers and I've got the optimal team, meaning you could postpone the Game Week 4 wildcard maybe to 6, 7 or 8, and it means that you've capitalised on the early points and then you're just going to wildcard when everybody else is later down the line. Now, of course, that is the optimal situation. I'm not saying it will happen, but it's not out of the realms of possibility at all. And it doesn't mean that you're fixing in your game week 4 wildcard altogether. It means you're giving yourself the opportunity to get lucky. And if you do, and you get big points, you're aggressive, and you don't have to sell players altogether, you postpone the wildcard, and it's a win-win. Finally, number 7, the 5 free transfers and the ability to keep transfers through the wildcard is just a game changer. Whenever I do look to wildcard and I think about it historically, I'm not actually making 15 changes to my team. Usually it's around 6, 7 or 8, but the key players usually do remain for a reason. And that is why, if we get to a situation where I wildcard in game week 4, I could get to game week 6 or 7 with 5 free transfers available. And I think that's enough to basically do a mini wildcard if the team requires it. So that is why I think wildcard in early doors is actually an okay strategy, knowing that we can build up 5 in the bank and basically call it a mini wildcard. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an update on why I'm planning to wildcard in game week 4. I do think it's important to have clarity on when you plan on doing so. Let's get into my team. So without further ado, here is my game week 1 final team selection. And kicking things off in goal, I have gone against all of my FPL reasoning and gone for a premium goalkeeper in David Raya. Historically, 4.5 million goalkeepers is just the way to play, and I still believe that is the case. But as of right now, I don't really think one has put their hand up as the obvious choice for our FPL teams. When I'm looking at a short-term strategy potentially of only game weeks 1 to 3, I look at David Raya and I look at this Arsenal defence and I see Wolves at home, Aston Villa away, which isn't ideal, but I don't rule out the possibility of a clean sheet for Arsenal there. And then game week 3 against a Brighton team who have been fantastic in pre-season, but I think it might be a step too far for the new manager against an Arsenal team who were just a well-oiled machine. And to be honest with you, I fancy Arsenal to keep a clean sheet in any fixture. And for these opening 3, David Raya, I think at 5.5 million, just offers what I'm going to say, quote unquote, is some guaranteed clean sheets, but I no doubt will come back to bite the bullet on that one. For me, I would prefer to have a Saliba or a Gabriel, but at 0.5 million more, the way that I'm structuring my team right now, I just can't get to them, but I would like to have a defender, it's worth noting, for the set piece potential, because we've seen it in pre-season already, a goal from Saliba and Gabriel. So I do think if you can get the 0.5 more, going from Raya to Saliba or Gabriel is a better move. But with the team structure I have right now, Raya is my choice at 5.5 million. My defenders for game week 1 are going to include Vardiel, Aina and Pedro Porro, a back 3 to kick things off in game week 1. Now Vardiel opening 3 fixtures, away against Chelsea, at home against Ipswich and away against West Ham. I actually don't think they're the easiest fixtures at all. And in terms of a player that may come out of this team last minute, Vardiel definitely is one of those considerations. I look at those games, and even though Chelsea have been pretty woeful in pre-season, this is a Man City team that are coming into this game a little bit undercooked with minutes for some key players. We haven't seen Rodri at all. We haven't seen people like Kyle Walker. Diaz, Akandri and Ake only slowly being integrated back into this team. No Foden, De Bruyne is a question mark. Oscar Bob now has an injury. So Vardiel, while I do always back this Man City defence, isn't necessarily a lock into my team. And the other thing that we need to caveat is we haven't equally seen that marauding left back that we saw last season. And that is the main reason why people are going for Vardiel. If he does take up more of a traditional left back role, which actually is more about possession and not necessarily about getting into the final third and influencing the play, I don't actually think Vardiel is an amazing option at 6 million. And for my game week 4 wildcard strategy, I'd actually much rather have someone like a Saliba or a Gabriel in that position to cover off the potential clean sheets. So I'm not absolutely locked in on Vardiel right now, but I think it's just the potential of him being that left back bombing on with attacking potential, which is putting me off actually avoiding him altogether. Aina's coming in. Now again, I'm looking at a 3 game week period. And Bournemouth at home in game week 1, where they've lost Dominic Solanke, I think is a fantastic opening fixture. It would be a little bit different if they had kept Solanke in their team. And when I look at the next 3 fixtures for Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth at home, game week 2 away against Southampton, game week 3 at home against Wolves. Really, really favourable fixtures. Again, a newly promoted team in Southampton. Wolves have lost, as we know, Neto and, of course, an injury to Cunha. So that is really enhancing these home fixtures for Forest. And the underlying numbers for Nuno were fantastic as a manager defensively. So I really do like Aina right now as my 4.5 million defender. But I do also have another one on the bench, which we will come on to later on, that rotates really well with him. And finally, Pedro Porro. If I'm going to go aggressive in the opening weeks, I need to go for one of the highest upside defenders in the game. And I do believe that is Pedro Porro. With Leicester away in game week 1, who have been woeful in pre-season, I think that's a great opportunity for clean sheets and potential attacker returns. And then Everton at home in game week 2. Again, if it was at Goodison Park, I think it's a different story. But at home against Everton, I think is a great fixture. So I think the upside's there. The only downside is in game week 3, away against Newcastle. I don't really want to be benching someone at 5.5 million. So I might just have to bite the bullet and play Pedro Porro in that game. But we will come on to that later on in the video where I preview game weeks 1 to 3 and how my team would rotate. So that would be the back 3 right now. Of course, there is no Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I do think he's a fantastic option. And I would love to be able to shoehorn him into this team. But as of right now, I just can't find the funds to do so. And also, I do think with Trent, there is that chance that maybe Bradley comes in for a couple of minutes here and there. We don't really know the answer to that. And that's the reason why I like the game week 4 wildcard, because people like Trent, if he does go off in the opening 3 game weeks, I'm not getting completely hurt where my overall rank is going to get ruined, but I can rectify it early enough in game week 4 to know that this is a guy that is essential for our FPL teams. So we are going for a 3-4-3 strategy going into game week 1, and my midfield is looking like this. The big news, no Mo Salah in my team. I've tried to build a team with Erling Haaland and Mo Salah in it, but to be honest with you, I just can't find the balance which looks right for my team over the opening 3 game weeks. And I also do think, while Mo Salah has been incredible for Liverpool, that was in his time with Jurgen Klopp. We don't actually know right now under Arne Slot whether he is going to remain the talisman in this team. I expect him to do so, but in those opening 3 game weeks, as I mentioned, I think it's an opportunity to swing against it. Save myself 5 million and go for those alternatives available like a Diogo Jota or a Luis Diaz. And as you can see right now, my choice is going to be Diogo Jota. When I'm looking at an FPL option, I've always loved Diogo Jota. His underlying numbers have pretty much matched Mo Salah in previous seasons when we take penalties out of the equation for Mo Salah. It's just about the minutes for Jota. And of course, we do have Darwin Núñez, we do have Gakpo, who can steal minutes away from Diogo Jota. But Jota is the one who has played number 9 the most in pre-season. He's had the most minutes. And I do think with Arne Slot, he is going to lean on Diogo Jota for those opening weeks. And let's be real, if I want a finisher, Diogo Jota is top of those charts in that Liverpool team. If he gets a chance, you know he's pretty much putting it away. I do love Luis Diaz as an alternative, but again, I don't really know which one is more susceptible to rotation. Again, we don't really know whether Arne Slot views Darwin Núñez as a number 9 or a player off the left. And then what does that do for Gakpo? Does Gakpo go off the left and Darwin down the middle? I think both are at risk of rotation, so I'd rather go for the one playing as number 9 and the one that I rely on in terms of his finishing ability. So we are going without Mo Salah for the opening 3 and saving ourselves £5 million. Saka is going to be the main premium in this team. I've built drafts with Odegaard in and I think it's fine. But if we can get ourselves the main man in this Arsenal team on penalties and those brilliant opening 3 fixtures, I think we have to go there. And at 10 million, Saka still offers amazing FPL value. And again, when I'm looking to invest in teams, I want great fixtures and a guarantee of what I'm getting with that team. And Saka's Arsenal just give us that. I think it's a warm blanket that we could put on in those opening 3 weeks, knowing that Arsenal are going to suffocate teams, they're going to get big chances, and most likely Saka is going to play the majority of the minutes in those games. And I feel really confident having Saka at that 10 million price point. The other 2 midfielders in my starting 11, Eze is a concern, but for different reasons to that of Ahmad. So the reason why I have a few issues with Eze right now, and we're going to put it up here because I've mentioned it a few times, Oscar Bobb's injury. Now, usually this would be an impact on Man City, but I'm a little bit concerned with the Oscar Bobb injury that maybe this is going to force Man City to dip into the transfer market. And maybe someone like an Eze is going to get picked up later on in the transfer window. And while that's great that he might be a Man City player, I think that actually worsens him as an option, because the reason why we love him in this Crystal Palace team is because he's a talisman. He's taken all set pieces. He's at the heart of everything good. And while he's in this Crystal Palace team, I absolutely love him. But I do still have a little bit of thought about it. I think, is there a chance that he gets sold to Man City? Because if he does, I think that puts a little bit of a risk on him in my game week 1 team. But as of right now, he is in. While the fixtures are mixed, I don't actually love him as much as others. We just can't really over-exaggerate the fact that he is the main man in this team. And if Palace are going to do well, it is going to be through Eze. Finally, with that Oscar Bob injury, while it has an impact to Eze, it also has an impact to this man, Ahmad. So he has only come in over the last 12 hours. Previously, it was Oscar Bob, as I mentioned, but the way my team is structured, I only need this player, this particular man, for 1 game week. And I think at home against Fulham, this is a great opportunity for Ahmad to be that ultimate differential. I don't need him for game weeks 2 and game weeks 3. It's just for this 1 game week in isolation. And at 5 million, I really do like him. Is he a risk for minutes? Potentially, but I do think he starts. And I think the fixture is good with that Polini absence in that Fulham defence. So Amad Diallo is going to be my ultimate differential. I do think Rodgers is a safer bet, but if I'm just looking at a 1 game week punt, Ahmad is that man. So to complete the starting 11, we have the forwards going into game week 1. And I can safely sit here and say to you that Erling Haaland and Alexander Isak are locked into my FPL teams 100%. I am all about the no Mo Salah draft, and that means I have to go for Haaland as captaincy options for the opening 3 game weeks. Now, spoiler alert, he might not be my captain for game week 1, but he certainly will be for game week 2 and most likely game week 3. And while there's one narrative that these injuries to Man City, the problems with fitness for certain players, is actually going to diminish the possibility of Erling Haaland's returns, I still back him. And if Man City are going to get goals, it is going to be through Erling Haaland. And I never can see Man City starting the season really poorly. Maybe 1 bad result, but I can't see 3. And if they're going to get results, they're going to get goals. And if they get goals, it's going to be Erling Haaland. And that is why he is in the team right now. Alexander Isak, I think, is just the most essential player in the game. Newcastle, we know under Eddie Howe, are just an attacking outlet. And with 2 home games in the opening 3, yes, the third one is against Spurs in game week 3, but game week 1 at home against Southampton is fantastic and also a captaincy option for our teams. The ownership is going to be massive. And sometimes I look at it and think, maybe I could swing against this player. This particular one, I just do not think it is worth it at all. So Isak is in and locked. The third spot, a little bit more up for grabs. Now, Dominic Solanke is in. And if I want to be aggressive with my moves, I do think Solanke is the better option. It's just the fear of unknown right now. Looking at Spurs, the chances they created for their number 9 last season in the shape of Son and Richarlison, it does add up that Solanke is just going to get big chances in this game against Leicester and Everton. It's not ideal having Newcastle in game week 3, but I do think Solanke is coming in and starting as the number 9. If that is the case, being aggressive with my wildcard, I think it is worth the risk going for Dominic Solanke in game week 1. And it's a great opportunity for those that are maybe going for a wildcard later on in the season. I think they're going to go safe and go for a João Pedro, a Muniz, or a Chris Wood. All great options, but I think they're going to be a little bit too scared to go for Dominic Solanke, even though they would like to go there. And for me, wildcard in game week 4, it's too good of an opportunity for me not to go for Dominic Solanke. But I will sit here and say this. If anybody's going to change in this team, it could be Dominic Solanke down to a Muniz or a Chris Wood to free up the funds to maybe invest elsewhere in this team, especially if we do get a few concerns about Eze maybe moving on from Crystal Palace. But that's going to be the starting 11. Let's come on to the bench and then, of course, captaincy and how my team looks for the opening 3. Finally, completing my game week 1 team is going to be the bench. Currently, we have a 4 million goalkeeper in Matthews, who is Crystal Palace's potential backup goalkeeper. Let's be real. If I'm spending 5.5 million on a goalkeeper, if I get unlucky and he gets injured, so be it. There aren't any 4 million goalkeepers, unfortunately, that are starting for any teams out there. So I think you take your pick, go for a lowly owned one, knowing that you can't really lose any value on that player. That is my basic top tip for a 4 million goalkeeper. Now, looking at my final midfielder, it is going to be Smith Rowe at 5.5 million with Fulham's fixtures. Man United away in game week 1 isn't ideal, even though they could definitely do a job on United with that United defence. But with Fulham's fixture at home against Leicester in game week 2 and Ipswich in game week 3, I think they are too good of a fixtures to ignore Fulham from an attacking perspective and a defensive perspective. Hence why I've also got Anthony Robinson in my team. I think that's a good balance of clean sheet potential and also attacking potential. And I will show you in a minute how my team would look in the next few game weeks and how they really well rotate with my team. The final defender is going to be Harwood Bellis. Now, this has been previously Brighton's Barco, but with the potential transfer of a new fullback, I just have a little bit of worry about Barco's game time in those opening few game weeks. And let's be real, I don't think I'm going to need this player at all. But if I do need to fall back on Harwood Bellis, I look at the fixtures and think, well, at least he could come in for game week 2 at home against Forest or away against Brentford in game week 3. The only concern is if Barco does play for Brighton, maybe gets an assist or a clean sheet, his price is going to skyrocket because of him playing such an advanced position. And I may lose out value on Barco with a wildcard in game week 4 with those great fixtures if he does cement himself as the left back. So a little bit more thought needs to be had on the 4 million defender, but I'm pretty comfortable going for Harwood Bellis. So taking a look at captaincy for game week 1, I do think I have a few options available here. I think Bukayo Saka at home against Wolves isn't being spoken about enough. Jota, if you want to take the punt away against Ipswich. Obviously Haaland, Isak and Solanke all putting their hands up. But for me, right now, I am leaning towards Alexander Isak. I think against a newly promoted team, on penalties, just a clinical finisher, and Newcastle being such an offensive team, I think it's got all of the things added up towards a brilliant captaincy option. And of course, his ownership is monstrous as well. And I do think it will be quite high with the effective ownership of captaincy. Currently putting the vice on Erling Haaland just because we know what he's like. I wouldn't be surprised if he does rack up a few goals against Chelsea with that defence that they've had in pre-season. But equally, the vice captaincy could be Bukayo Saka or even a Diogo Jota. But I feel more safer going for Erling Haaland in case something terrible happens for Alexander Isak. I don't think captaincy is actually locked in for a lot of people in game week 1. I think this is going to be heavily spread, so we do need to make sure we get it right. And I think Alexander Isak is going to be my pick. So finally, I wanted to show you how my team would look between game weeks 1 and 3, because as I mentioned, I am planning a wildcard in game week 4, but I need to reiterate the fact that I'm not completely locked in on a wildcard 4, and that's why I think this is a great strategy to go for. It means I'm aggressive early doors, I go for Spurs, I go for Arsenal, I go for those punts like an Ahmad in game week 1, knowing that I can rectify the problem in game week 4 while rolling my transfers to the maximum of 5, but also, if I get lucky, if Diogo Jota just emerges as the best Liverpool asset, then maybe I can postpone my wildcard later on. Something else I didn't touch on, which I quickly need to do so, is the absence of a Christopher Nkunku. I've thought about it more. The way that my team was set up, I wasn't looking at starting Nkunku in game week 1. I then looked at game week 2, not the best fixture away against Wolves, and then game week 3 at home against Palace, who we've all been talking about how Palace have been good defensively. So all of a sudden, even though Nkunku has been fantastic in pre-season, I would like to have him, I look at it and think, is he actually the best option in those opening 3 game weeks? And I've come to the conclusion that that is no, but I am also aware that this is an elite finisher who could easily hurt me in any game, and I do have a little bit of a difficulty going there. At the end of the day, I could do Eze to Nkunku if I wanted to, but looking at my team for game week 1, we've already spoken about it, how it would look. I'm pretty much locked in on this. Coming into game week 2, to give you a bit of an idea, this is how the team would rotate. I would take out in my team Aina, and I most likely would bring in Robinson for that brilliant home fixture against Leicester. And Smith Rowe would also come in for Amad Diallo, because hopefully by then I've had the minutes of Amad, but I'll be worried about his game time in game week 2. So he's done his job for my team. Smith Rowe would come in for that brilliant home fixture against Leicester. And in terms of captaincy, of course, that would move on to Erling Haaland, with the vice captaincy most likely on Isak, or potentially a cheeky punt on Diogo Jota. So I'd feel pretty content with my team looking like this. And a quick reminder, this is the Fantasy Football Fix tool, Google Chrome extension called FPL Plus, fully integrated with the official site. It is so damn good. So that's how game week 2 would look. Finally coming into game week 3, and this is the only concern that I do have with my team. It doesn't look great for game week 3. If we look at the fixtures that I'm missing, I have the assets at Arsenal, which are great. Aston Villa, I don't have them away against Leicester, but I don't think many managers will, so that's not a big problem. Brentford, again, not many people investing in them. I don't have Chelsea at home against Palace, which could be a concern with no Christopher Nkunku if he does emerge as a fantastic option. But outside of that, I think the fixtures are just pretty difficult as they are. So my team would look likely this. Aina definitely could come in for a Pedro Porro if I am concerned about them conceding a bag full of goals against that Newcastle team. But all in all, I'd be pretty content with this team, knowing that if I get lucky, Solanke becomes essential, all of these other players look great options, I can postpone that wildcard until game week 4. But the plan right now is this will be the final week of this team. Then I'll be looking to wildcard in 4 and revamp it with maybe a Phil Foden downgrade from Erling Haaland and maybe an increase from Jota to Mo Salah. But that is the team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's final Game Week 1 team selection video. Now, as always, because the deadline is tomorrow, I will be doing a final team thoughts video in the morning and a deadline live stream. So if there wasn't a better time to do so, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because if there are any small changes to the team, I will update you in tomorrow's live stream and also video. But I do feel pretty confident with the team that I have selected. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop a like and of course, smash that subscribe button. Check out any additional content in the link below for Patreon or YouTube membership if you want to get involved. That is always massively appreciated. Have an amazing day. If you have any questions, get them in the comments and we'll talk real soon. Take care. Cheers.